We go to my colleague now, Aviwe Mtila, who is at the second day of the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation's annual Drakensberg Inclusive Growth Forum. And this year the focus is on agriculture, BRICS benefits for South Africa and producing skills needed for the economy. And speaking during the first day, former President Kgalema Motlanthe slammed the state of municipalities around the country. He says 90% of them are in trouble and many others are completely dysfunctional. And my colleague Aviwe Mtila is on standby tracking that story for us. Good afternoon to you, Aviwe, and thank you so much for joining us. Very crucial issues being discussed there, just on the dysfunctionality on municipality and the impact that this has on the economy and communities as well. What else came out in the forum?
How to take the country forward. One of the people that just took off skate was the Minister of Trade and Industry, Aviwe Mtila, who joins us now just to give us some of the way forward. Minister, thank you for joining us at eNCA. Myriad issues facing the country, but maybe at the fore, issues like inequality. How do we bridge the inequality gap to ensure that all South Africans move forward in one direction in unison?
I think what we heard today was a number of examples of concerns about not only inequality but also the debilitating effect that has on young people and on society. And there are really three things that we can do that can make a contribution that we're now really ramping up. The first one is inequality is a function in part of high levels of economic concentration in the economy. And when you have two firms or three firms dominating a sector, it's very difficult for smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses to survive in that market, to grow in that market. So through reforms of our competition laws, we're now implementing measures that will open up more sectors of the economy. We recently dealt with shopping malls where big retailers, grocery retailers, lock themselves into a 20 or 30-year exclusivity agreement. No small competitor can come in. That is now being discontinued. That's being stopped. We've dealt now with e-commerce, where the practices of large players, sometimes global players, limits the ability of township enterprises to grow. A delivery service on food in a township gets stunted by the fact that the big franchises historically have said you've got to use Uber Eats. So it's about opening up that. The second area is dealing with the need to industrialize, to provide more opportunities for small and medium enterprises and bring more young South Africans and black South Africans into productive activities, into manufacturing. And so when we put in place, for example, the tariff measures, it is about creating space for people in South Africa to produce. We did that quite successfully with poultry. We did it with clothing and textiles, and we're seeing green shoots there of new businesses that's starting up and young people coming into those. And then the third example is jobs themselves. That when the economy creates more jobs, it helps to reduce the levels of inequality. And so we've got to tackle inequality through skills, enhancing skills of young people, through asset redistribution, and that means giving an opportunity for black industrialists to come in by supporting them as government and getting the large corporates to incorporate them into the supply chain, and by boosting the focus on jobs. Right now, our biggest project is the African Continental Free Trade Area, opening up trade with 54 other African countries. When you see fast-growing economies elsewhere in the world, they trade with their neighbors. Historically, Africans have not traded as much with each other. And so the African Continental Free Trade Area can really boost growth, job creation, and we hope make a really important contribution in dealing with inequality.
Minister, what has been the challenge in reaching all that you have mentioned now? Job creation, just opening up the industries themselves and ensuring that equal participation happens. What has been the challenge, given that we're in almost 30 years of democratic South Africa? In recent years, the GDP has been growing at a sluggish 1%. What's at the fore of not getting things done?
Well, I would want to start off by saying that there's also been, in the 30 years, tremendous progress in the number of of young black graduates in the smaller businesses that have been started up, in successes that we've had with black industrialists. For example, every time you see a Mercedes-Benz on the road, that bonnet and those fenders have been produced by a black South African who meets the demanding standards of global manufacturing. So there's been those examples of real success, but there's also been significant challenges with the speed and with the scale of getting the transformation that we need. And I would single out two broad factors. The one is structural, that trying to dismantle the structures that have held back progress in creating more jobs and more economic opportunity has been the greatest difficulty. Our laws have not always been aligned to what has been needed. So we took a big reform package to Parliament to change the competition laws. That has been done now and is being implemented. But the other challenge that we've had in getting higher levels of growth quicker and higher levels of economic inclusion has been the impact of COVID, of the Ukraine war, of all that. We've identified 5 big shocks, from energy unavailability to rising fuel and fertilizer prices. Now what we've done is we're dealing with those matters. The energy crisis is now really focused most of the attention of government to fix that, so that we're able to get back to having the fuel that can drive opportunities for economic inclusion. So I think that in fact it looks a lot better going forward, having gone through these big 5 shocks of the last 4 years. The South African economy has shown more resilience, more ability to adapt, and it is poised now for an offtake. And we can strengthen that with these programs that I've spoken about, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the boost in investment that we're seeing.
All right, Minister, thank you very much for your time. Minister of Trade and Industries, Aviwe Mtila, of course, at this inclusive forum hosted by the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation at Drakensberg.
And Aviwe, mentioning very key and pertinent issues that plague the country, not only at the infrastructure crisis, but primarily looking at the government interventions. Very quick to say that the focus on the energy supply and security thereof is something that government has zoned in on, because they understand that failure to do so then impacts on the ability of not only municipalities to perform, but generally for the economy as well, to produce either GDP results and output as well. What else came out of this 2-day conference, a dialogue among equals?
Well, it's still ongoing, the conference itself, but you'd understand that even state-owned entities are some of what is at the fore, still to be delved upon on how to turn around the issues that are plaguing the SOEs. You mentioned service delivery. I mean, I had a conversation with Mcebisi Jonas, the chair of MTN, who suggested that 1994 dream has been complete. It's done. Now we need to look at ways that will include all South Africans, not only just the politics themselves, but civil society, the private sector, just other players in South Africa themselves, just to ensure and have a dialogue, a discussion on how to take the country forward. Significant time that is mentioned, given that we're just months away from the national and provincial elections that will decide, of course, who governs the country 30 years later of the democratic South Africa. So those discussions still happening here. We're expecting then day 3, the final day, to happen tomorrow, where we do expect the patriot of the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation, the former President Kgalema Motlanthe, to close off the proceedings here at around noon.
All right, Aviwe Mtila, eNCA reporter, thank you so much for joining us. He's out at the second annual discussion or forum of former President Kgalema Motlanthe, who focuses or highlights certain challenges that the country faces and how to mitigate that.